How can a kid become who they truly are if they're getting all of these messages thrown at them that are so confusing, that are scaring them half to death, that are taking them out of their creativity and their exploration?
They don't need to know half the things that we're telling them, whether it's political, whether it's gay, straight. Racism was a thing that we've talked about recently.
Their biggest concerns in life should be learning how to tie their shoe, and like their biggest source of frustration should be having to share. And I just think those labels, whether it's LGBT Pride Month or the patriarchy or whatever, it shrinks us and it closes our mind. And I want kids to have minds as big as the universe.
The messages that we pound into kids, it doesn't have to be that way. Find a different message to give them besides politics and all the bad things. Fill them up with love and creativity and butterflies and rainbows.
Why do kids keep getting all of this fear-based political and religious dogma thrown on them by adults? I'm back with my childhood best friend and my most frequent podcast guest, Morgan Thompson. So we're going to talk about some of the things that happened in our lives this week that brought this topic up, how we're really frustrated by the indoctrination of our kids, how we just want adults to leave kids alone. And we're also going to talk a little bit about our own childhoods and some of the messages we got. And we're hoping that together, by talking about this, we can brainstorm, both Morgan and I, and also you, the listener, on how we can start to parent and mentor our children differently, where they're not so met with fear by adults, but instead adults are allowing them to explore and be creative and think for themselves and figure out who they are, rather than us telling them who they should be or how they should think. So, Morgan, I'm going to bring you in now. And how did I do? Was that an accurate representation of what we're going to be talking about today?
I feel like it. I feel like you summed it up pretty well. Yeah, this week has been interesting, just with all the things going on in my part of the world and your part of the world.
So a few days ago, I had uploaded a short of me and Morgan's 10th episode Q&A bonanza that we did. And the short that got a really frustrating comment was a short about, is moralism relative or is it absolute? As in, is the world like black and white, right or wrong? Or is there a lot of nuance and a lot of like wiggle room around morality and values and even maybe what truth is? And so I'd answered that I believe the older I get that moralism is relative. And someone wrote about how basically that's everything that's wrong with the left, not even knowing where I stand politically, or that I try not to get into politics at all. And it was just like a very like sort of brainwashed response. It was like a hair trigger knee jerk response. And so I went to look and see who this person was. And I was really sad to see that it was a 9-year-old boy. A 9-year-old should be playing and going out and get his knee scraped and, be exploring the world and, have his head up in the clouds. And instead, he's already been told who he is and what to believe and what side he's on, and that there should be a fight, a war, and that he should take a side. And it just really hurt my heart.
Yeah, I admittedly have not even looked at the comment because I didn't want to go there. It makes me sad when kids are taught so early how to be keyboard warriors. I can't say that word today. Um, Keyboard warriors and defend things that they don't even have the life experience to understand yet. It's just really sad.
It's just what he heard his mom or his dad say, and he was just repeating. And my better half was like, Patrick, there are trolls. Maybe it's a robot or a troll farm, but even if it is, there's still, I know for a fact, because I was one of them growing up, that like there are plenty of 9-year-olds out there that, feel like they have to wear this mask of, just repeating what their parents have told them to believe, or maybe they have actually internalized it.
Yeah, I have a kid who she's older now, but anything that she hears me say, she takes that on and makes it her thing. And so I have to remind her all the time, these are my opinions. These don't have to be your opinions. You get to go and live your own life however you choose. What I believe does not have to be the same thing that you believe.
Yeah. And probably when I started this podcast, I wouldn't have brought up this topic. And I started thinking about, why is it that I am so afraid to talk openly on the internet, or even, in my job or whatever. And I think it's because I have a lot to lose, and I brought that up to you, and you actually said the same thing, that you often don't sort of respond the way you might want to when you see these things happen, especially around kids, because there's a lot you have to lose also. So maybe we should go ahead and just address that. First, you go, what do you have to lose? And then I'll go and say what I have to lose.
Gosh, so one of the things that I had to lose is the thing that I just lost, and it has been a very interesting journey. I was afraid for a long time that if I spoke up about the specifics of what I believe about Christianity, if I spoke up about where I stand with politics and my particular beliefs on some of the big ticket items as far as politics are concerned, that if I spoke up and said what I truly thought about those things, that I was going to lose the community that I've had my entire life. Uh, Recently, I lost that community. There are some people who have stayed in touch, and I'm really grateful for those people. But for the most part, we walked away and lost all of that. Um, that's been hard. It's been very, very, very lonely. However, I don't feel like I'm walking around lying to everyone anymore because there's no one to lie to. My husband knows what I believe about, important things. And there's things that we don't agree on, but we can, because we love each other, we can talk about them openly and, give grace to each other for our different beliefs and allow each other that space to explore and grow and understand more about what we think on different subjects and to evolve, because who I was 10 years ago is not who I am right now. Losing that community, it hurt. It was hard, but there is a freedom with it that I didn't quite expect. I thought that it was just going to be crushing forever and ever, and it's not. We've built a new community, or are trying to build a new community from scratch, and that's been difficult, but it feels more true. Because these are people that I don't have to have those conversations with. It just, if they come up, great, and we're able to be charitable in our responses to one another about those hard subjects, or just leave them off the table altogether, which is really awesome when we just don't have to talk about those things. We give each other space to be who we are and just enjoy spending time together, having new experiences together, learning other things together that don't revolve around those hard subjects.
So there is something to lose when you go against the grain and you start speaking up about what you think.
Absolutely.
So it's funny when you and I talk, because in the environment you're in, you feel like, okay, you're more open than the people around you, and you have something to lose if you tell them like who you are and what you think. And I have the opposite experience. I'm in such an open environment that I actually see some things that aren't quite right about it, and I'm afraid to speak up because I, I'm afraid of, you know, basically being labeled a bigot or a homophobe or whatever if I say what I think, even though I'm gay.
Right.
It's funny, like you and I, we don't agree on everything, but I think we're probably more alike on many things than we are different. But because we're in two very extreme environments that are opposite, we often, when we talk, we see things or talk about things very differently than the other does. But then often we sort of land, even if not in the same place, as you said, like there's a place of grace and a place of like understanding, and there's nothing to lose between us. And I wish it was more like that in society, where there wasn't, where you and I and other people didn't feel like there was something to lose if we spoke up and said what we honestly felt.
Yeah, absolutely. I think more often than not, we end up in this kind of middle place where we're kind of moderate on most political things. I feel like, uh, yeah, I'm glad that there's nothing to lose with this conversation between us because it makes it like a safe place to talk about these things, and we can kind of bounce ideas off of each other, which is helpful.
Okay, so we've talked about sort of this message that sort of riled me up, not in an angry way, but it actually it made me feel very sad. Like why can't we do a better job? Like, I was 6 years old. You and I were 6 years old like 5 seconds ago, and now we're in our mid 30s, and we're the ones that are in the child rearing stage of life. And I just look around and I see some people doing a pretty good job, but I also see a lot of people, even though I'm not a parent, I can make a judgment and be like, ugh, that's not very good. Mm. Like, when I see 10-year-olds wearing Trump shirts or Biden shirts, that just it makes me crazy. It makes me absolutely crazy. I just hate it.
Yeah. So with homeschooling, I have, complete control over what my kids learn and don't learn. And my middle kid, she's about to go into third grade. Um, I'm not even sure she knows what a president is yet. Like, we've talked briefly about presidents past, but as far as the political sphere right now, nah, we don't touch it. She doesn't need that right now. There's plenty of time for her to memorize all the presidents and learn about um, political parties and what all those things stand for. Right now, she needs to live in this blissful life she's in. Right now, I'm watching her on my front porch eating watermelon. That's what she needs to be doing. She doesn't need to be worried about all this other stuff because she's a child, and children should be protected in that way. Now, I'm not saying shelter them from everything. I'm not saying don't teach them important things. She'll get taught those important things when I feel like it's developmentally appropriate for her. At this point, we're not there. There's no need for that. That child has anxiety, and she she needs to not have this added on to that. I'm not going to heap uh, generations of American trauma onto my 7-year-old. That's ridiculous.
Agreed. I couldn't agree more. So let's go to the first issue that you and I talked about in this long chain text message that we were on together. Obviously June is Pride Month, and you and I even made a video about what it was like for me being a gay teenager. But that wasn't me taking some sort of political stance or being like, everybody accept me, damn it. Here in Norway, at least, pretty much all of the daycares, like the preschools, 3-4-year-olds, they have a whole Pride Month celebration. And my neighbors, I love them. And they lived in the US, even though they're Norwegian. They're really wonderful people. But they were telling me about the Pride celebrations in the daycare and everything. And they were all for it. And I didn't say much in the moment because they are who they are, and they have the right to believe or think or want for their child whatever they want. Um, but for me, it just really concerns me because I think that age range, like, just let's talk about the 4 and 5-year-olds that I was working with when I was in the daycare, right? Like, their biggest concerns in life should be learning how to tie their shoe, and like their biggest source of frustration should be having to share, not like having all this information thrown on them about this, that, and the other. And maybe the daycare workers do it in a as age appropriate a way as possible. I don't know, because I didn't work in June, so I don't know exactly what they were taught or anything. Yeah, I didn't have the openness in my church or in my family that I probably needed to be able to ask questions. And I knew I was different and it was very uncomfortable. But at the same time, I don't know that I would have felt any more comfortable if my entire classroom had a month-long lesson about what it means to be gay. And I don't think that would have helped me, because I was so afraid or shy or introverted, or it's just such a private thing, or I didn't even know what it meant yet, that why would I raise my hand and be like, yes, I'm gay? And yeah. And also for the other 90%, like, why should they have to be confused over the other 10%? Like, just like, why should the whole class not be able to eat peanuts just because a few kids have the peanut allergy? Like, I just, there are real concerns that I have around all that.
Yeah, so it's interesting what you said about, like, why should the rest of the class not be able to eat the peanuts because of the one kid with the peanut allergy. So we're a dye-free family because of behavioral things. So we avoid all of the dyes with numbers. We only do like fruit and vegetable dyes. So recently we went to a birthday party and I took my own cupcakes for my kids because instead of, expecting someone else to cater to us, I made the choice to plan ahead for what was best for my kids. There were other things there that I didn't take, for our kids, that I had to read labels on. I had to make sure it was safe for them to eat. But that's my responsibility as their parent. Like, I don't expect anybody else to cater to them. I do expect them to respect my wishes when I say, please don't give them this. I expect that courtesy, but I always make sure that there's something else in place. So, other people teaching other people's children, it gets weird. Like, I can't, I don't even know what I would say to that. I don't know, because our kids are homeschooled. They're always with me. They're never not with me, except for right now. They're with their dad, um, running in and out, slamming doors. There was a door slam. I don't know if you heard it. Um, I don't know. I wouldn't want my kids to be in a classroom where, at that age, where sexuality was talked about at all, whether gay or straight. I don't think it's important for them to know at that point in time what any of that is. Like, they have so much time to figure all that out. It shouldn't matter what bathroom somebody uses, because I'm going to be with my kids, because I'm their mom, and that's my responsibility to make sure that they're safe. So, anytime people get up in arms about any of that, kind of in either direction, it's like, well, where's the parent? Why is the parent not taking charge in this and protecting their children from whatever they think the boogeyman is? Because each side has a boogeyman, right? Each side is going to have a thing that is just the worst thing ever, and it's out to get the children. Everybody has a conspiracy theory. Where are the parents? So try not to get into the weeds on those things, because at the end of the day, I'm the one that has the say in what happens in my house and what my children are learning. If I send them off to somebody, then yeah, I've kind of relinquished that. Maybe not. I don't like using the word control, because I don't want to be seen as a control freak. A lot of the time with homeschooling, that's how we're seen, is, we just want to have control over everything. Well, yeah, kind of, because what's out there is crazy in all the directions. It doesn't matter which side you're rooting for. There's some messed up stuff going on. And mostly just the innocence of our kids. Like, they don't need to know half the things that we're telling them, whether it's political, whether it's gay, straight. Racism was a thing that we've talked about recently. My kids just like people in general. At least that's what we're trying to teach them. They do ask questions, but God made everybody different. Isn't it cool that that person's skin is different than yours? Isn't their skin so pretty? That's how we address that. And occasionally we do have to address harder topics. We do it in an age appropriate manner. We don't just submerge our children in this world of, Black history in America. They're not ready for that yet. One day, yes, we will. They're not there yet. One day, yes, we're going to have the hard conversations. Not hard. One day, we're going to have the conversations about sexuality with our younger children. We've already been there with our older kid. I think we did okay. She loves everybody. She embraces everybody. And I'm so proud of her for that. But that didn't come without a lot of work on our part to teach her those things in an appropriate manner and at the time that she was ready for.
It's just very concerning. And, we want a child very badly. And I don't want my child to be learning about, I'm gay and I will have a child as a gay man with my gay boyfriend. I'm super, super, super gay, like as gay as can be. And I don't want my child to know anything about LGBT or Pride Month or, like they don't have any business. Obviously, they're going to be, our child is going to be asking us earlier than most kids, would ask, like, why do I have two daddies? Or, like, obviously he or she will be curious and their interest will turn to that because our family will look different than other families, but that's not the job of the school to teach him or her about that, or that's not our job to make sure that no one else ever says anything inappropriate about us. That's our job to assume that there's going to be questions from that child, and there's going to be questions from other kids, and questions from families, and maybe not even questions, but maybe judgments. And it's like, we need to be prepared to deal with that, and we need to come with that with some wisdom. And also, there's this poem in Norway by this guy who lived in the west of Norway. He was actually an apple farmer, but he wrote poetry. And the idea of it is, do not come to me with all the truth. Don't give me the entire ocean when all I can handle is a glass full of water.
Mhm.
Like, don't give me more than I can handle. And I think that was a big part of what I was reacting to this week, and seeing that comment on the shore, and thinking about Pride Month in the daycare and some of the things that were going on with you, is like, can we not like drown our kids with an ocean of judgments and conflicts and stereotypes and labels and all of that? Can we just let them find out for themselves on their own time in their own way?
What you were saying about how your family's going to look different. My family looked different. For my oldest daughter, I mean, it looks different now for the little ones too, because of her, or not because of her, because of me and her being here as a result of me. I was a teen mom, 15 years old, had a baby. So when she was in public school, there were teachers that commented and said all sorts of ugly things to my child about her existence and my age. Um, it's not their place. It's just not their place. It's not. It's not a staff member at a school's place to comment on the structure of someone else's family.
Yeah, and I think even if you come from a nuclear family, like, okay, mom, dad, um, and 2.5 kids and the dog in the house and everything, like, there's still
They're still stuck.
people can always find something to say. Yeah. Um, so I think that's enough of the whole LGBT thing, unless you have anything to add.
I mean, I will say, so for my family, we have plenty of gay friends and gay family members, and we don't talk about it with our kids as far as like, oh, this is what that means. Um, it just is, like, it just is what it is.
Or like, for example, I Zoom call with your kids, and they're what, 4 and 6?
4 and 7 now.
Yeah, 4 and 7, and, like, they see my better half on the screen, and, me and him and Ollie, we, go up and talk to her, to both of them, and talk about how pretty their hair is and all of that, and, but I would imagine that you don't tell them afterward, "Oh, this is what this means," or blah, 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 or there's a word for that called GAY or anything like that.
But we don't talk about the specifics of what it means. It's just this person is married to this person, and that looks a little different from what we look like, but it's fine. They love each other. They love us. We love them. What's the deal? Like, what's the problem? I don't see any reason to get into the specifics on any of that with a 4 year old and a 7 year old.
I think anytime you add a label, whether it's LGBT, blah, 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 the other alphabets, or it's this person's a Muslim, or this person's whatever, like, I think there's some sort of like brainwashing that happens when you start thinking about labels, or you quit seeing people as people and you start putting them in groups. And that's my big source of frustration, and what I take issue and pause with. Actually, it happened with us a few weeks ago. We were doing the episode on with Field of Dreams actor Dwyer Brown, where you and I were reacting to an interview I did with him. And at one point he had talked about how lucky he was to have white skin, and you brought up um, something about privilege. And I think earlier you'd said something about the patriarchy in a previous video. And it's like, I don't really like those words, because it, to me, somehow it takes away the actual experience or the actual emotions, or it, I would much rather be with someone where they talk about that part of their story or how it affected them, than to hear that word, because when I hear those words and those labels, it automatically turns on like programming that I have, programming from my childhood,
Mhm.
program which was conservative, programming from my 20s, which was in more liberal cities. And I just think those labels, whether it's LGBT Pride Month or the patriarchy or whatever, it just it shrinks us and it closes our mind. And I want kids to have minds as big as the universe.
Yeah, when you put a label on somebody, it designates them as other. They're different than you. So then how can you have a relationship with somebody that's that different from you? I think from in my experience, that's what it tells me. That's what it tells children. They are other. They are not to be messed with, basically. And I don't want my kids growing up like that. I don't want them to have that experience. I want them to love everyone.
Something I just thought of right now is, I guess when we were little and we were told, "Oh, we're Christians and we need to get saved and baptized and we're Christians,"
Yeah.
that also created a certain amount of othering also, like, "Oh,
Yeah.
they're not Christians. We're Christians."
Well, the whole point, right? The whole point of church and being a Christian is to go and tell others and make more Christians, and that's great. I'm working on that with myself and figuring out what that looks like for me now. I think it's great to share the gospel and share, all the good things that Jesus taught. Yeah, that's what I want people to see of me.
I'm raising my hand for those who are watching on YouTube. Do we really have to tell them? Can we not just like live well and use attraction rather than promotion? Do we really have to proselytize? Okay, keep going.
Yeah, I mean that was kind of what I was getting to. Yeah, I don't. We were always told, at least I was always told, they know that you're different by the fruit. You know a tree by its fruit. You know a tree by its good fruit. So if you're out there doing good and spreading love, then people are going to know that you're different and they're going to wonder, what's different about that person? And that's when you tell them. But then it seemed like as we got older, it switched from that to you just have to go out and tell everybody. And that's, all of your relationships need to be about this one thing. Since then, I've had pastors that have promoted more of relationships and kind of going back to that. You show them, by the fruit. You build the relationship first, and then you proselytize. You still got to get them in there somehow.
But let's talk about the thing that happened this week with you and a family member where they were asking you about homeschooling, and it's also on the same theme. Do you feel comfortable talking about that?
A family member was over, and they were telling me about a new friend that they had made, and just telling me about this person, and that I would really like this person because they believe like I do. And she commented on what this person believed, their political alignment, basically. And I was like, wait, you think that I am that? Like that blows my mind. I don't. And what have I done that makes you think that I am that? And I just realized that I haven't openly said enough about what I do and don't believe, which may be a good thing. It may be a bad thing. I don't know. All I want people to know, this is what we talked about, or where we kind of ended up. At the end of the day, all I want people to know is that I love them and that I want what's best for them, whatever that looks like. I don't I don't want to be out here with, flags in my yard stating what I believe or who I'm voting for.
Yeah, it's a presidential election year, and right now everybody has their vote for XYZ person in their yard. And yeah, that's a little crazy making for everybody, I think.
But yeah, driving down the road here, it's very obvious, and people want you to know what they believe as far as politics go. I've just never really, I don't think I've been that kind of person.
But do you remember, you had brought it up because to me because you were saying, "Why is this bothering me so much?" So can we talk about that part of the conversation?
But yeah, like I didn't want to be aligned with these people or this group of people that I have essentially put in a box, or maybe they put themselves in a box. I don't know. Um, I mean, around here, I think they kind of put themselves in the box because they are so loud and not loud about the good parts of that party, because I believe that both parties probably have good things to say. Both of them have good motives in certain areas, sure. But most of the time, what you hear is garbage, just hot garbage coming out of these people's mouths about hate from both sides. It's all of them. It's all of them.
All of the labels that I was just talking about, they're using all of the labels and lots of judgments, and their kids are hearing it. That's the part that pisses me off. Is like, they're not saying it around adults, they're saying it in front of their kids, and it's like, have you no shame, people?
Yeah, for real. So that's where I was getting frustrated, because have I been spewing the same hate that I've been seeing, and that makes my stomach turn? Because if I don't want to be in that box, that's not, I don't want to be aligned with that party and that train of thought. I don't really want to be aligned with the other one either, to be totally honest, but I don't want to be viewed as a hateful person. And when I think of that political party, because of where I'm at and the people that are around me, most of the time that's what I think of, is just hateful people. People who post the most ridiculous things on Facebook, um, or will attack you if you say something else. And that, I guess that goes back to our conversation about not wanting to share some of our beliefs because of what we have to lose. I don't want to have those conversations on Facebook with anybody. I just want to love people. That's it. I just want to open my home and my heart and my hands, and, just be a good person. I, so, yeah, being aligned with that, it just made me feel like I had not been seen as who I want to be seen as, or as who I feel like I am.
Well, and I think in that conversation, I kept asking you, like, "Why does that bother you?" Or I kept asking, like, why?" Which I think is, like, sometimes just the best question to make people go deeper and understand, okay, like, what's really going on here? And the thing that we got to, uh, I don't know if it was the bottom, but at least I quit asking you why after we got here, was you were like, "I don't want the people to put a label on me or think that I'm in a box." And I said, "Morgan, there's no box in the world big enough for you anyway, so don't worry."
I don't know if you want to go here yet. One of the things that she mentioned that this other person was struggling with was CRT in public schools. The person was thinking about homeschooling.
So I went to the Graduate School of Social Work at the University of Houston, because I wanted to help people, and it became something very different than what I thought it would be. Um, and so that's where I learned a lot about this whole critical race theory, anti-racism, all that stuff. Um, and my experience with it was that it was pretty nasty. I'll just leave it at that. There was just a lot of it. In a way, it was like being back in the Southern Baptist church of my, childhood before we moved to the church that you and I grew up in, where the pastor was screaming and yelling. The teachers were yelling at us with red faces about how, white people had done this and that. And it was just really inhumane. It was really okay. I'm just sharing my opinions and my reactions about it. Um, it was absolutely not open to discussion. Like I knew that if I objected to the teacher, that was it, and it wasn't actually a classroom discussion or anything. It was like her preaching and us listening. And I'm thinking of one particular teacher. Her name was Abba Brown, and she made my skin crawl, and it was just really nasty. And she got teaching awards, and it was like, you know, it was like she hated white people, and she was getting paid to talk about how she hated white people. Yeah, my stomach's hurting just talking about it, and I'm having a hard time keeping my train of thought. So, were you asking me specifically, like, what are the points?
Yeah, like, I honestly don't know much of anything about it. I know that it was a big ticket item here with the local elections a couple years ago, because of like school board stuff, and I kind of just tuned it out.
So I was in that graduate program back in 2019, like when, for example, the 1619 or whatever project by that woman who was at UNC Chapel Hill, I think it was the 1619 project, where she was basically saying that the country wasn't founded in 1776, that it was founded by like the first slaves that came over, and the country was built on the back of slaves, and basically that white people are oppressors, and they are the people that white men specifically, white Christian men specifically, oppress everyone else, and so basically you got your good guy and you got your bad guy,
Mhm.
and basically the blacker, the more woman, and the gayer you are, and the more atheist you are, the more holy and saintly you are, and that it's basically a religion. It's basically like it's just as brainwashed as the church that especially the church that I grew up before the church that we went to. But basically they see the US as a place that is bad, that is um, built on the backs of slaves, and that we owe reparations, and that but my takeaway from it is, even if there was reparations, they would always say that wasn't enough, or it's like it's not a rational argument. It's not like a ration it's just like, okay, white people are bad, we're good, and that's it. And the funny thing about it is most of the teachers in that school were white upper class women. They were white themselves. That was the ironic part of it to me. And actually the dean of the school was a white man.
This is kind of different, but sort of the same. There's a song called "We Americans" by the Avett Brothers. I don't know if you know any of their music, but my child actually, so she was in a classical homeschool program, and they had to do speeches on occasion, have to memorize something and recite it. It was just the recitation part of their curriculum. Um, while a lot of her classmates were choosing historical documents and biblical passages, at one point, or no, they were choosing speeches, I think, for that one, like historical speeches. So somebody, recited Abraham Lincoln's speech or whatever. She chose to recite that song. Admittedly, I showed it to her because it just spoke to what they were learning about at the time in history. Anyway, it's talking about America was founded on the backs of slaves. Yeah, I do believe that. However, there's things about this country that we can love and hate at the same time. Both things can be true. It can be true that, yeah, our history really, really sucks. However, I didn't do it. I can say to my kids, this is what and that's why we haven't delved into certain parts of history yet, because I don't know how to teach it without getting upset myself. Thinking about slavery and the history of our country, even further back than that, thinking about colonization here makes my stomach turn. There's nothing I can do to change it. There's nothing I can do to change the color of my skin or my heritage. What I can do is teach my kids to be better and not repeat history. And if they see history starting to repeat itself, then they need to stand up and say something. That's all I can do at this point. I don't think that reparations, they might make somebody feel better, and that's fine if it helps somebody feel better. And that's not my place to say yay or nay on it. Um, but is there ever going to be enough to pay a debt like that? Like, can you ever repay a debt that big? I don't know that you can. So at some point, and I feel stupid even talking about this as a white person because I don't know. I don't know what that feels like.
That's a tactic that school of thought uses to discourage you thinking about your own experiences with it, and just take the labels that they want you to have, and
Mhm.
just see it the way, and like sit down, shut up, don't ask questions because you're white, and if you ask any questions then you're racist yourself. And that's not right. You should be able to think for yourself and question and explore your experiences or what your feelings are about it. And the way that information was given to us, there was no room for any emotions, for any discourse, for any opinions, for anything besides this is the way it is.
Yeah, I can see why that would be concerning to have in public schools for sure, or any school. Um, yeah, like I said, I just didn't know enough about it to even have an opinion when that was brought up.
I think that it's really good for people that are more emotional and like more empathetic to be able to explore those topics. But if they truly are empathetic, then they should be able to find a way to explore those topics and present it in a way that leaves out the brainwashing and leaves out the labels and allows adults and children and all of us to explore it and to be curious about it and to talk about it. And so, yeah, it's just another example of how like this whole brainwashing, like just leave kids alone. And I understand to some degree. I'm also just trying, like in my mind, I'm playing devil's advocate a little bit. Like, okay, maybe we do to some extent need these people like LGBTing it up and CRTing it up, because of course there are some adults in some families that are so brainwashed with like vitriol that that side feels like, okay, we have to come with a vitriol to meet. But like, what does that do? Like at the top of the hour, you were talking about grace and how you and your husband can give each other grace. And where's the grace on either side? Like, can we replace like the brainwashing and the labels with some grace and some, you were saying, how can you repay a debt that big? You can't, but you can give
Right.
grace, and you can realize that like life's not fair and it never will be. And like, that's just a fundamental tenet of being human in this world. Like, it's just not fair.
Yeah, I think that goes back to boxes too. Like nobody wants to be put in a box, right? Nobody wants to be lumped in with everybody else.
Well, I thought I was going to be learning about like Jungian concepts and like, you know, the inner journey and all the things that I talk about on this channel. I didn't really learn any of that in that school. Okay. I had one good class and one good teacher who became my mentor before she passed away. But, you know, the one good thing about all of that stuff that I went through where is that it really helped me see, you know what? I grew up in an environment just as extreme, just as hateful, just
Just
as name calling, labels, bully, judgment, everything. It was just the other side. And
mhm,
can I just say fuck it to all of that? And
mhm.
like, I'm not going to be a part of that. And I'm just going to be fucking allergic to it. And if I see it around me, I go berserk and I hold it in because I know I have to be like a human on the face of the planet, and it ends up people pleasing because I have something to lose, as we talked about. But it drives me fucking bananas.
But and that's the thing. That conversation with that family member made me realize maybe I shouldn't always keep my mouth shut. Maybe I should speak up more when I see an injustice. Not in a hateful way, obviously. You know, I don't want to jump all the way to the other side, but in a way that says, hey, this isn't right. What can we do to change this? How can we change the words that we're saying and the actions that we're taking and actually love these people and help these people rather than holding up these god awful signs about how they're going to hell or, you know,
Especially when you're in front of your kids or their kids.
yeah, for real. And we have the internet now. People are going to see you. If you're calling yourself a Christian and you're holding up signs saying that, you know, God hates gay people.
Does that still happen? Because I'm here in Oslo, Norway, where like it's gay, 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 gay times infinity. Does that even still happen in 2024?
Yeah, it happens. I can probably find it on my phone super easy. I have a friend who went to a pride festival in Salisbury and he shared um, some photos of his time there. And it looked like he had a great time with his friends. In the background of some of his pictures, I'm trying to get there so I can read the signs.
You know, and before you do that, actually, you know, it's funny. I was just saying that we're like super gay, 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 gay here, but actually last year, the year before, there was a nightclub shooting at a gay pride event.
That's awful. It happened here a few years ago in Florida. Um, I don't understand. I don't, and the shootings, I don't understand. It's not nice to hear that it happened there because you don't want it to happen anywhere, but at least it's not only here because that's one of the things, one of the talking points here is always about gun control and that, you know, gun control is going to fix all of the things, and that's not necessarily true.
Wait, can we just talk about guns for a minute?
Yeah, let's talk about guns.
Okay. My granddad gave me a Remington 1100 shotgun like he did all of the other grandsons when I was the Christmas of my 13th year. It was a rite of passage. I'm a lifelong member of the NRA, whether or not I like it, I think from birth. So I'm probably more conservative than many people on many things. Okay. But about the gun thing, it just, it's just hard for me to see pros and cons on that. Like our family, we will not have a gun. Okay. And our kid if he becomes, 16, 18, 20, and he wants to, like, I'll teach him how to do it safely, but we ain't going to have a gun in the house. And, I just, that's one thing that I do really value about Norway is, there was that shooting last year, and there was, like a mass shooting, I think in 2012, which is not comparative to a mass shooting in the US, but we don't have that issue here. And I'm really grateful for that. I just cannot come to terms with how prevalent guns are in the US. And, I personally feel like it's not right. And that's something that I do not talk about and that I keep quiet about. But it just, that's something else. It's like, can we fucking keep kids safe? Like kids accidentally shoot themselves and their kids, or like their school shootings. And, it just, I, yeah, I just, can we just keep kids safe and let them not have to go through a metal detector? Because that has to shut down your creativity. If you go to school and the first thing you have to do is go through a metal detector, how can you like focus on the task of childhood, which is developing trust in the world that it's a safe and loving place?
America, the world is not a safe and loving place. Here in America, people have to have guns to protect themselves from other people that have guns. That's the oxymoron of it all. Like, I have a gun to protect myself from some scary person that may have a gun that may barge into my house. I had a stalker a couple of years ago. So yeah, I'm gonna have a gun. I have a security system and I have a gun.
And that's just an example of how you and I disagree on things, but like I have enough grace to understand why you have it and everything. Like, and I really don't have a problem with you having it. And I understand why people feel the need to have it. And if I were still in the US, I've never had a gun in my adulthood, but maybe I would feel that once I had a kid. But for me right now where I'm at, it really just hurts my heart that like kids have to walk through a medical detector at school before they get to color with their crayons.
Yeah, that's one of the reasons that my kids are not in public school is because I could not, the anxiety that it took to take my oldest to school every day, and I worried the entire time. Um, it was a nightmare for me to take her and leave her knowing that that was a possibility every single day. Just recently, there was a shooting at a splash pad in Michigan. A freaking splash pad.
What's the splash pad?
Splash pad is like it's a thing in a playground. It's concrete. There's water like underneath the concrete.
Oh, okay.
It runs up and like there's all these water activities for the kids to do. Freaking splash pad got shot up. That shouldn't happen. That should not be a thing. But when our people that are supposed to protect us are not protecting us, yeah, the guns kind of. I have one. My kids know how to shoot a BB gun. They think it's kind of fun. And there's a big difference in shooting cans and shooting people, obviously.
Well, I grew up with guns and shooting guns, and I think you're not truly from Four Oaks, North Carolina, if you don't do that.
Right. Well, but guns scare the crap out of me. Like I don't carry my gun. I don't. It stays put away where it's safe. It's here in case I need it. I don't carry it out in public and I catch a lot of flack for that.
You carry flag that you don't carry it in public?
Yep, I get a lot of crap from people about not carrying my gun in public. I say I don't feel the need to. Sometimes I wish I did. Like a older couple got carjacked in Four Oaks 2 days ago. A guy held the gun up to the man's head and said, "Give me your keys." And it's crazy that that happens here. And I think that's why people feel that they need them. But if they were, I don't know. It's one of those that I can't reconcile. Like either way, I think if I lived in a different place, yeah, I'd feel safer and I wouldn't feel the need to have one.
Well, I took us way to Pluto. You were gonna tell me about the gay signs, so let's go from, guns back to gays.
Even now, there's still people protesting with signs. Like that's just what they do here. And I understand everybody has different beliefs, but I don't understand being that loud and obnoxious and just mean with your beliefs. Like that's when you're tearing down who a person is, or I know I know that's not all that a gay person is who they are. Like I'm not just a straight person, but it is part of what makes me who I am. It is part of what makes you who you are. It's part of what makes this friend who they are. I can't imagine tearing down that part of a person. Like, I'm not going to walk up to a straight person on the street and berate them, which they would say that that's because what they're doing is not a sin. I'm not going to walk up to a person having an affair at the Applebee's and go off. That's just not what you do. So why is it okay?
Well, something I was thinking about when you were saying about the protesting is, in the US, there's this like huge prime on free speech. So maybe it's like, okay, let's keep the free speech, but can we have it with some grace and some dignity for ourselves and the person that we're disagreeing with?
I don't think people care about dignity anymore. I don't think that it matters. I think they just are so worried about being loud enough to be right. They want to be right, and they want everybody to know that they are right.
And that's when you get a 9-year-old telling me that I'm blah, 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 this political about a short that I write. And that drives me crazy because can we leave the 9-year-olds out of it? He should be making his videos about Elmo, not telling me about my political beliefs.
Exactly. Yeah, my life is a great big bucket of gray, and that's how I want it to be. I'm happy that way. So yeah, one of these signs says warning: homosexuals, liars, fornicators, atheists, hypocrites, drug users, Muslims, the prideful, sin approvers, idolaters, racist, baby killers, watchers, Catholics. Hell awaits, judgment is coming.
Were all those labels about homosexuals?
No, I think it only said homosexuals once.
So that was a list of all the bad people.
Um, Another one says Jesus saves from hell, and then this last one says homosex is sin. Romans 1.
If homosex is sin, it's a sin that I'll take any day of the week. It's quite enjoyable. I don't mind it.
Oh my god.
So I was thinking as we were talking about all these things this week about, LGBT and preschools and, your family member saying that she wants to homeschool her kid so her kid doesn't have to learn about CRT and all this. I was thinking about the ways that I got brainwashed when I was a kid. And I think probably the biggest one for me was actually about the rapture, about Jesus is going to come back and he's going to take the good people and he's going to leave the bad people. And, I think I asked Jesus to save me and come into my heart every single night because I was really afraid that if I went to sleep, mommy and daddy would go and I would stay. And I actually slept on the floor of my parents' bedroom until I was 13. I think on my 13th birthday, my dad was like, "You're a teenager now. You have to go at least sleep on the couch." But, just in case, like, hey, I wasn't going to be left behind. Okay. It's like the first stage of a child's life is about building trust. And, if you teach them that like the world is fundamentally a bad place and Jesus is going to come back and judge who's good and who's bad. And oh my God, that's just such a fucked up message to give kids. Like, even if that is part of like what you believe as a Christian or whatever, can we focus on like some better parts of the faith than that part? So that was something that really messed me up as a kid. And then obviously like the whole gay thing, uh, 5 years old, I think I don't know that I was hearing anything like yay or nay about gay. Um, but I definitely remember um, a man in the church that we went to before we went to the church that you and I attended with our families. He committed suicide. And I remember one of my dad's best friends coming over that night to our house and saying, "Yeah, you know, killing yourself, that's kind of like being gay. That just sent you straight to hell." And he just said it matter of fact. And something else I heard was, when I was coming out, when you and I were teenagers, one of the leaders of the church that we were going to, I'm going to be vague so people who are from Four Oaks won't know who I'm talking about. One of the leaders in that church, he came over to the house and my parents went away and they wanted him and his wife to talk to me. And he said, my cousin died before he was 30 of AIDS, and I don't want that to happen to you. And I remember the day that I'm 30, almost 36 now. I remember the day that I was 30, even after all that time and all of that space away from like Four Oaks and all those messages. I remember the day I turned 30, I could literally feel my body just breathe a sigh of relief, like, oh, I made it. It took me from age 17 to age 30 to realize, like, okay, I'm not going to die when I'm 30. And the reason I'm bringing these things up is because, like, children, even teenagers, but children especially, are super impressionable. And I just don't think we're mindful enough of what we're teaching them. Like, um, it's so inappropriate, some of the things that I was taught, not because they were trying to hurt me, but because they had been taught things. They were brainwashed or they were programmed in certain ways. Now it's more like from the left, we tend to think of, like, with the CRT and all this stuff, but, like, for me, it was like the right, and focus on the family radio station saying that, you can get AIDS if you use a toothbrush behind somebody else or whatever. And, like, we listen to that shit going to school every morning, ironically in between Elton John tapes. So my point is like, kids are just super impressionable. And, just as one example, I waited 13 years of my life to make sure I wasn't going to die before I was 30 years old. And I just, I want to do everything I can not to put that on any kid that I'm around, especially my child. And I wish other people would have that same care and that same wish. And I don't even think they're aware of what they're doing.
No, I don't think they are. So I try not to judge.
I judge.
Yeah. I mean, I judge myself more than anybody else. I'll say that first and foremost. I'm judging myself just as hard. Yeah, you can't judge me harder than I'm already judging myself, and I'm going to judge you less than that. But yeah, working in children's ministry, that was an eye opener. And there's one book that I picked, the whole Bible actually, the Jesus Storybook Bible that we were going through with our class, and there were messages and symbolism in there that went over their heads and could be kind of scary at times. Um, I also don't think it's appropriate to tell kids from the moment they're born that they're sinful and in need of a savior. I think, you know, and that I'm going to catch flack for that. That's okay. Whatever.
No, I was talking on the episode with Lana Jernigan, who you also know from our teenage years. I was asking her about that because, she was talking about becoming who you truly are and this whole process of maturing, or, all of that, that we talk about on the podcast, but she was talking about it through more of like Christian vernacular. And so I asked her about, like, what is sin to her. And I told her exactly what you just said. I said, like, I remember holding your oldest baby when I was 16 and just thinking, it's just like perfect. This is heaven on earth. And
It's perfect.
I don't understand how people can think that humans come into the world sinful. Like, if you've ever held a baby, how could you think that?
Some people that babies cry because it's sin. No, babies cry because that's how babies communicate, dumbass. Like, it's not sinful. Jesus cried too. He had to have. How would his mama know how to feed him? Like, just use your brain. Sometimes that's what I want to say. Use your brain. Saying that babies are sinful is such garbage to me. But I don't want to tell my children that they're sinful. And I don't want to tell my children that the things that they do that are a normal part of child development, like sibling fighting all the time,
Or just getting on your nerves?
like that's not. I don't think it's sinful. I don't think that they're going against God by fighting. I think that's how God made them, and their brain is growing. I think the sin part comes in later in life when we know that this is the way God wants us to go, and we go in the opposite direction. Um, and that could be as simple as, that feeling of, I need to go talk to this lady at the grocery store that looks like she's just really having a bad day, or this old person that is struggling to find the right cereal. Let me go help them. If I turn in the other direction, that to me feels like sin, because I know that I could be useful in that situation, and I'm not. I'm choosing myself over somebody else. That's sinful in my opinion. But to tell tiny children that they're sinful and that they're going to burn in hell for all eternity if they don't choose Jesus, that's traumatizing. That is traumatizing. And is that really how you want to win your children to religion?
Through fear.
I, Do you remember ever going to judgment houses?
Oh God, yes, yes. And just to just bring home for anyone who may be listening, just to bring home why we're talking about this one more time. What you and I were talking about this week was like, how can a kid become who they truly are if they're getting all of these messages thrown at them that are so confusing, that are scaring them half to death,
Mhm.
that are taking them out of their creativity and their exploration? And certainly the Judgment House was one of those. Those Judgment Houses scared me shitless. So why don't you tell people what the Judgment House was and how it affected you?
So, yeah, traumatizing. Instead of judgment houses would pop up around Halloween usually when all of the spooky haunted houses were popping up as a Christian alternative to the haunted house. And you'd go through and you'd see somebody living recklessly, and then there'd be like a car accident or a motorcycle accident or a house fire or whatever. It had people from the church dressed up and playing these characters. It was like a play that you could walk through. Great in theory, but then you get to the hell scene and it's just awful. Like this person dies tragically in whatever way, and they go to hell. And you see that. And I don't remember the redemptive part of it. Do you? Like I don't remember any heaven scene because I think I was so stuck on the hell stuff that I don't even remember the good parts.
Well, we've been to several. I do remember, there was one that was a Rapture one. That was the one that messed me up the most.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, Judgment Houses were way scarier than anything I ever learned about around Halloween because that stuff stuck with me psychologically.
You're told that that's real in a haunted house. You know that it's not real. You know that that's not that those things don't really happen, or they're made up to be scarier. But you're told that that judgment house, that's how it actually really is. This is a real depiction of what's going to happen to you. That's scary as hell.
No pun intended. But, actually, I do remember there was a heaven scene in one of them because they were trying to juxtapose the righteous person who had gotten saved at the last minute and sitting at the right hand of the Father with Jesus and, all that stuff, and then you go to hell, and that makes hell even more, like, gripping and yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember the heaven part because I think I was just so messed up by the rest of it. Like, ugh. It's so weird because I enjoy listening to like the hellfire and brimstone preachers just because of the way they talk. Like,
At least they weren't boring, right?
right, like the sing-songy kind of preacher that gets real loud in some places and real soft in others. Like they know how to emotionally draw you in. They're fun to listen to, but not like really listen to. If you really listen to them, it's going to scare the crap out of you.
The
Um,
world's going to hell in a handbasket.
Literally, you're going with it. And I'm not saying I'm not a Christian, so please, anybody that's listening, that don't think that that's what I'm saying. If you're from here and you know me personally, please don't think that I'm teaching my children all these horrible things. I'm not. I'm just trying to help them not be traumatized by things that they don't have to be traumatized by. We do talk about religion and Jesus and church, and um, but I want them to understand first the good parts. Understand first what it looks like to try to emulate Jesus and be like Jesus and show Jesus to others. The Sermon on the Mount is a great place to start. It's always a great place to start if you're trying to teach children how to love others. Some grown-ups need that also. Right now, there's a big thing about the Ten Commandments being put in a school. Um, I don't even know what or not what country, what state it is. I want to say Louisiana or Alabama. I don't know. It's one of those. Everybody's so excited because the Ten Commandments are being put in the schools again. Well, great. What about the Beatitudes? What about what Jesus had to say about loving each other? Blessed are the meek, blessed are the merciful, blessed are the peacemakers. And peacemaking sometimes looks not like we think it's supposed to. It's peacemaking, not peacekeeping. That's my favorite thing to say to my children and my husband and my mama. Blessed are the peacemakers, not the peacekeepers. Uh, Yeah, I think it's important to talk about the good things more than the bad things. Yes, I am worried about my kids' soul and their future after death, but at the same time, I'm trying to be realistic and acknowledge that I don't know what that looks like. And around here, there's always the Bible's clear, the Bible's clear, the Bible's clear. There's some things that the Bible's not super clear about. Hell is one of those. The Bible is not super clear about hell, and I'm not going to go off on that tangent, but if someone has time and they feel like looking into it, look into the times that you see hell in the Bible and look into the actual words that were used back then, because they mean something different than what we have in our brain. They don't mean the same things, and in certain places there are times that we have to look at the Bible as what it was when it was written. Um, Letters to people, or people, metaphors, people trying to make sense of the things that they didn't understand, which is what we're all still doing today, trying to make sense of the things that we don't understand. So what happens after you die was a thing that people didn't understand. So they they turned a lot to Greek mythology for that. Um, Talking about the depths of Hades. Well, look into Greek mythology a little more. I don't know, just do your own research. And I know everybody's opposed to research these days, but look into it yourself, figure out what you believe.
That's what I'm saying. Kids naturally know how to be creative and explore, and when they're taught all these fear messages, they grow up into adults who aren't able to explore and be creative and be curious and look into whether or not there is a hell, or they just take it at face value because, they got all these messages from childhood that basically, I'm not a fan of the word trauma or PTSD because it's one of those words that have brainwashed people into like, oh, I know what that means. It means this or that.
It gets overused for sure.
Yes, correct. Yeah. And but I do think kids get traumatized over these messages that they hear. And like the simplest word, if it's said the wrong way to a sensitive child can, it can kind of take them out. And then they grow up and they're 25, 30 years old and they don't even remember what happened. And they have all this fear and all this contempt prior to investigating these really important things about how to live and how to die and all of it. And it's like, just for example, I was thinking when you were talking about the Bible stories, like Noah's Ark is a pretty violent and judgmental and condemning thing that, God did to the human race. And like, do we really have to teach that to kids? Can we not teach them about a sweeter, like maybe Psalm 23 or,
Yeah, that was always talk to the kids about, because how do I explain that God killed all the babies too? Because their minds can connect those dots, like their little brains, while they're not developmentally ready to understand it, they're not stupid and they can still connect those dots. So even if you don't say God killed the babies, they're still going to figure that out. And there's places where the babies did get killed, um, and it's made pretty clear. Um, One of the things that you mentioned, the couple that came to talk to you, you said they had
wait,
had.
before we go there, can I just say one thing? Okay, I'll be a little bit more specific than you were around the whole hell thing. I have done my research, and it's kind of like the babies coming into the world sinful. Like, if you really believe in a God that loves humans and did all the things that the New Testament talks about, or, if you just have any common sense, right? Like, God is like our parent. Like, would a parent ever send a child to hell or kill them? Like, I guess if they're a fucking psychopath, but I mean, how could I believe in a God that would send anybody to hell? Or even make that place. Like, I just think it's like all the research I've done aside, like when I just look at it through the eyes of like me as an adult holding even someone else's baby that's not my own, I just can't fathom a creator, whether it's a person or whether it's energy in the universe or whatever you want to call it or think of it as. How could they send any of us to anything that's not benevolent and good and wholesome after this life? And also, like, there's enough hell on this earth for their, like, let's just focus on that instead. Like, let's get ourselves out of the hell on earth. And part of the hell on earth is like teaching our kids all this crap. Okay, now you can talk about the other thing or respond to what I said.
The other thing that I was trying to touch on, you had mentioned somebody commenting on a person who had committed suicide that they were going to hell. That's the thing that messed me up growing up. When I was 20, yeah, I was 20, my uncle committed suicide. And it was, you talk about traumatic. That was traumatic for our whole family, I think. Just the way everything happened, it was really, really hard. Um, your parents were still deacons at the time, and I remember them coming to the house, not the day that it happened, but I think maybe the next day or day after, I don't know, but I know all the deacons kind of descended on our house. And the elder in our church at the time, he was so kind. And at this point, my dad was working for your dad, and so some guys from the shop came too. Um, the question came up, you know, is he destined? Is his soul destined for hell because he committed suicide? Because that's the thing that we had just always been taught. And the elder at our church at the time, I didn't know this about him, but his dad had committed suicide when he was younger. He said, I don't think that that's true. I don't think that people who commit suicide go to hell, because if you're in your right mind, you're not going to kill yourself. Like, that's just how it is. And what kind of God wouldn't have grace on someone with a mental illness? So we were told that it was sin because murder is sin, right? And to murder your own self, you murder yourself, then you can't ask forgiveness. If you can't ask forgiveness, then you can't be forgiven. That was that train. That was how that all was put together. But it was like the way that he put it to us with the mental illness was kind of a buffer for that, I guess, that God would give grace because of the mental illness that caused the suicide. That was the thing that I struggled with really hard at that point in my life, because if you knew my uncle, the most loving man in the world, so much light and just goodness came from him, but he was in a really rough spot. And his mind just got the better of him. I couldn't reconcile a God that could, first of all, allow that to happen, and second of all, then send him to hell. That just didn't make any sense to me. So it was very comforting when this elder came in and said what he said to us. I remember us all just sitting in silence for a good little while and having a good cry. We don't think about the things that we're saying in the moment, typically. We don't realize until much later the impact that the words have. That's what I've realized.
But it sounds like maybe that elder, he had a moment of wisdom and mindfulness, and he realized, you know what? Actually, what I say in this moment is going to impact this whole family for years to come, and how they grieve, or maybe they don't grieve. They shut it down if I say the wrong thing. And so this whole time I've been belly aching about how people don't pay attention to what they're saying to other people that are impressionable, and it messes them up. But I think that's a concrete example of it going the other way. That if you are in your wisest self and you are drawing from your own experiences and you're not focusing on labels or what you're taught, but instead you're coming from your heart. He had personal experience with that situation. So he wasn't coming from a place of judgment or a place of, I was taught 1 + 1 = 2. He was coming from, my daddy died and I had to figure that out for myself. And he had something to offer in that moment. And he actually, through the pain that he experienced and how he worked it out, he was able to show up with wisdom and help y'all so that y'all didn't have to. Maybe he could just lighten your load a little bit that day.
Oh yeah, yeah. You're not thinking about it. Yeah, he was very wise and always very intentional with his words. And I want to be like that. I want to be like that. I want to impact people for the better and leave goodness in my wake. If I stir the pot, I want it to be with goodness. Just sprinkle glitter and love and happiness all over all of it.
One other final example that I'll give of sort of these kind of messages that that I got when I was a kid that kind of thwarted my becoming who I truly am, and maybe why I'm just so sensitive to worrying about whether or not kids these days are having it in whatever avenues of their life is, before we started going to the church that you and I went to in middle school and high school, that Southern Baptist church that I went to. Oh, how do I talk about this without outing important people in my life that probably wouldn't want me to air their dirty laundry? Um, well, I'll just say it. Okay. So there was a big debate in my church about evolution. So there was an elder named Mr. Niles, and he was always a really, really nice guy. And we went to his house for dinner, and my parents really respected him. And all of a sudden, overnight, he became a villain. He had decided to start teaching evolution in a Sunday school. He had been, I think, going to a theology course through like some program at Duke University, which is a Methodist denomination affiliated school. So obviously, it's going to be a little bit more open than, yeah, Southern Baptist, in the middle of nowhere. And my dad just lost it. So Mr. Niles went from someone who was respectable in our family and we talked well of, to basically, it wasn't even that he was bad. It was like he didn't exist anymore. Like he just vanished from the earth. They would take me to these business meetings to discuss what to do about Mr. Niles and what to discuss about this thing called evolution that was corrupting the church, blah, 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 blah. And that's an example of how, like, do not bring an ocean to a child when all they can do is drink a glass of water. And literally, there was, a red carpet in the middle of the church to obviously represent the blood of Jesus that was spilled for our sins. And the bad people were on the left side, the people that were supporting Mr. Compton, Mr. Niles, and the righteous people, like my dad, were on the right side. And I just remember, these were my people. These were people that, like, they were pregnant with their kids the same time my mom was pregnant with me. Like, I don't remember a time of not knowing, you know, these kids who were my friends and, their parents. It was like something between community and family. It was more than more than community in that church. And I just remember all these people that I didn't realize were people. It's like they were God, I guess, to me in my very adolescent mind. All of a sudden, my innocence was lost because I realized these people are nuts. Like, I saw people I respected screaming at the parents of children that I'd spent the night with, like, just a few weeks before. And, my dad was one of them. And I lost a lot of respect for my father through that incident. And I don't know respect, but I definitely lost my innocence through that whole thing. And um, I remember this one lady. I won't say her name, but I really respect her. I talk about her in my book, and I've referenced her on this podcast before, I think. But she was a really wonderful lady. She played the piano at the church, and she just went up to me because I was doing what that Elmo kid did to me when he responded to my short. I was just spewing off about, like, how, oh, these people, they're going to hell, and I can't believe they believe in this bad evolution thing. And I didn't even know what I was saying. And she overheard me in the parking lot. And, I was just repeating what I had heard. And because as much as I love the people on the left side of the aisle, they weren't my mom and my daddy, okay? And they weren't responsible for, like, my spankings and my food, okay? So I was just saying whatever, parroting whatever my dad had said. And she just looked at me and she said, Patrick, there's no reason why we can't still be friends. And that was an example of what you were speaking about earlier, that man just bringing some grace and some truth and some dignity into a difficult situation. Like, I mean, that moment, as painful as all the other stuff was in that church, and like we left the church, and that was super painful for me to not, I mean, kind of like maybe what your kids are going through right now. Like, they've only known the church that y'all have gone to, and it was very painful for us to leave, for me. But that is the thing, the good part that I remember in that situation is her having a little bit more wisdom and mindfulness than the rest of the people in that situation, and just saying something true and eternal that will stick with me for the rest of my life. It's like, you can disagree with people and still be friends.
So there's good people everywhere, and we need to do like Mr. Rogers said and look for the helpers.
And I think we can all be helpers if we can just notice, am I responding from a place of calling something a name, whether it's like, oh, that's gay, or oh, that's like, even if it's just a concept, like, oh, Christian, or sin, or like, am I coming at it from a label or something I've learned, or am I actually coming at this thing from my heart and from, as you said earlier, from grace and dignity? Maybe that's the first step. I'm just thinking out loud here.
Yeah.
Like, can you at least just be aware when you're responding from brainwashing? Maybe.
I think in order to do that, you have to have a level of sensitivity and self awareness that some people maybe aren't ready to have because there's, like we talked about in our last one, you know, when you open yourself up like that, you're opening yourself up to a lot of hurt. Um, if you don't open yourself up, though, you're setting a lot of other people up for hurt. If you can't have that sensitivity and self awareness and empathy and compassion, then all you're going to do is hurt people, right? We can't truly love people if we're not going to open ourselves up. If we stay closed off and choose to stay in our box, how can you love people well from that box?
And what do you think opens people up the most? Like, do you think it's pain? Like, this man that came and talked to y'all about how your family member wasn't going to hell. Do you think pain opens people up?
I do. I really do. Um, because I know I'm not the same person that I was before that pain. And there's pains that I've had since then that changed me further. Without those things, I wouldn't be who I am. And the person that I was not a great person to be around. Not saying I'm great now, but I feel like I have a level of compassion that I couldn't have had otherwise. Um, and an ability to see all of the different shades of gray rather than black and white. You know, life is not black and white, at least in my experience. So I'm able to see all the different possibilities of whatever somebody may be going through.
So I want to ask you, what can I, Patrick, or the listener, if maybe they're feeling the same way as what I'm about to say, what can I/we do if I'm in the situation where I see adults coming at kids from this brainwashed, not open place? And then as I'm asking you that, I want to know your answer, but as I'm asking you that, like, I'm thinking of like what you just said. I'm thinking, okay, maybe can I also release maybe some of my brainwashing and some of my whatever around those kind of people, and can I open myself up to them? Like, maybe I can't actually fix any of this at all, period, but maybe I especially can't fix it if I'm reacting to their closeness with, oh, they're brainwashed. Like, maybe I have to open myself up to be hurt to their brainwashing also if I want any chance of them opening up even a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point because by saying they're brainwashed, you know, you're calling them the name just like they would be calling you a name.
Okay, so we've been talking for 2 hours now, and I just realized, okay, I'm a hypocrite. That's the moral of the story today for me.
But aren't we all? But when you realize that, when you have that recognition of, oh, I'm a giant hypocrite, like I'm doing exactly what I'm upset with these other people for doing, that's when you can actually change your behavior and you can't change somebody else. You can't change somebody else. Um you're responsible for you. You're responsible for your thoughts and actions. So all you can do is change the way that you talk to other people and the way that you're going to raise your child and the things that you're going to instill in your child. And in a way, aren't we all indoctrinated into something? Um, make sure it's something worth talking about, like loving others.
Or I can't help. Or You can be indoctrinated to trying to become who you truly are.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, and that's what I want for my kids. It's to just be the best version of themselves that they can be and be truly them. We were watching old videos the other day that I had uploaded onto Amazon to try to clear off space on my phone. Watching these silly videos of my kids. Like, oh, yeah, they're still exactly the same people that they've always been. And I'm so grateful for that because it didn't have to be that way. Like they could have gone to public school and or even just been exposed to different people who would try to squash who they are, but we've really protected them from that squashing. Um, and so it's beautiful to look back at those videos and see exactly the same child. Like, yeah, there's growth in different areas, where there needs to be, but as far as their personality, where they are is the same. And I'm so grateful for that.
No, I remember your middle daughter, she has the biggest eyes in the world, and they're full of, like, not f not fear, but, like, awe at the world and awe at, like, AWE, all at, like, the world is so big and there's so much to take in that, like, my eyes can't even see it, so my eyes have to be bigger. And she's still like that now.
She's still like that, and that her brain is so big and so fast. Bless her heart. It's a struggle. It is a struggle in this house to keep her um, occupied enough, just occupied, like so that she's not getting into trouble. Because she will find something new to learn, something new to explore, and if she doesn't have that, then she's gonna destroy everything. So she's a handful, but she is just amazed by everything all the time. And it's beautiful to see that. It's beautiful to have the opportunity to watch that blossom and just grow in her instead of squashing it.
And she has a huge capacity for whatever that is. I think much more so than the average person. I mean, there is no average person, but she has a huge capacity for awe, in my opinion. And I saw it the first time I ever met her, and I still see it now.
Yep.
And I do see how hard it is for you because she's like climbing on your head half the time when we talk, but
Yeah.
you're keeping it intact. So good for you.
I think they're out playing in the pool right now. So yay, it's quiet.
Any other takeaways from the conversation before we wrap up?
I feel like all I ever say is love one another, but that is like the kicker. Just love people, love them well, and try to be understanding and compassionate and empathetic, and all of these not bad messages, but the messages that we pound into kids, it doesn't have to be that way. Find a different message to give them besides politics and all the bad things. Fill them up with love and creativity and butterflies and rainbows. I don't know.
I think it takes more energy and it takes more openness and it takes more frustration, but I think it's worth it.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's hard. It is not easy. Um, and our life here is not sunshine and rainbows all the time, but we do our best. And we try not to focus on the hard things more than is necessary. If it's not a problem that I can solve immediately, if it's not a problem that they can solve immediately, if they can't fix something in 30 seconds, they don't need to know about it right now. They don't need to know.
Do
Like,
not bring the ocean to them when all they can handle is a glass of water.
absolutely. Yep.
I think anything's better than that. And so my big takeaway today is like, I don't have to fight. I don't have to disagree with them, but I can open my heart. And maybe as I open my heart, and as you said, love them, give them more grace, give them more dignity. Maybe I can also maybe use some humor or say something in a salty way or be a little bit sassy, or maybe that open heartedness will give me a little bit more of the safety that I want to see kids having, safety to focus on things they should be focusing on, and also do it in a way that's not judging the other people for being brainwashed or whatever. So that was as clear as mud, but that was my takeaway for the day.
Yeah. People can't help where they come from. All they can do is change where they're going. So give them the love and grace and support to get there.
That's it for this week's podcast. It was a really difficult topic for Morgan and I to discuss, but we hope that it gave meaning and value to you. If you enjoyed the podcast episode, please consider going over to patreon.com/Patrick A. Parker and subscribing. And while supplies last, when you subscribe, I will send you a version of my book, Becoming Who You Truly Are, on Audible. Thank you so much for listening and watching. And until the next episode, I wish you nothing but the best on your life's journey to becoming all that you truly are.